That's awesome. My name is Luciana Cardarelli, and I am the Catholic Leadership Development Services Coordinator for CPCO. I'm responsible for PL and our AQ programs, including PQP, Spec Ed for administrators and the Principals Development course. We are so happy that you're with us today, that you're taking time for learning. What has gone on in these last few weeks, I'm sure you'll find extremely valuable. This particular program, this particular project is a joint project with our other principal associations in the province, OPC and ADFO. Our ADFO colleagues have had a similar webinar in French, however, and we are constantly co-planning and co-creating with them in order to get a best sense of what's going on in the province and how it is that we can best meet the needs of our membership, because our goal here is to serve. With me today, Linda Ford de Cunha, Teresa Paoli, and Bruno Palera. I want to thank them. They'll be introducing themselves a little bit later on. Bruno acts as project coordinator and has been the one to kind of keep the strings together for everything. And Bruno, I'll get you to move forward to that land acknowledgement slide, if you don't mind. And what you're going to see is a couple of really gorgeous images, which I'm hoping have been a part of your life over the last few weeks. With Thanksgiving having been so recent, I know that I was really able to think about gratitude that I feel each and every day. As associations, our offices stand on the lands of Treaty 13, and we constantly think about the responsibility that we have as positional leaders with respect to using our positions of influence to make a difference. And Bruno, I'll get you to go forward to the next slide as well. And what you see here is land acknowledgement that you may find a resonance within. From our perspective, again, it's important for us to understand what happened in the past and understand our responsibility as leaders today in redressing the impacts of colonialism, the impacts of oppression, and using our position to make things different for the future. I personally take on that challenge in my work each and every day, seeking to find ways that connect me back to our Indigenous brothers and sisters and learning from them as I continue in my work. We are going to have a few things on the go today, and I'd like to state up front that today's session is going to be quite content heavy, because while there are things that are the same and you'll find very, very comfortable, there are things that you're going to find quite new. We have embedded QR codes throughout today's presentation, and that will give you access to resources that we're referencing through our work today. Your voice, however, is extremely important. And to that end, we would invite you to use the chat, which I'm sure everyone's very familiar with these days, as well as the Q&A. And we'll make sure that those are opened up in the next moment or two. Also, you have the opportunity to engage the closed captioning function within Zoom. And you may find that along the bottom of your screen. And if it's not showing up there, go to the three dots, which is probably towards the bottom right corner, and you should see captions there. You can engage that, so you will have closed captioning for all of the conversation and dialogue that's presented here today. As well, you'll have opportunity for a transcript that comes out of that. Also know that within 2 days, you'll receive a follow-up email, and that email will give to you links that, again, go to the resources we share, as well as the PowerPoint that's being used today. Our whole goal is to make this as useful and practical for you as possible. Feel free at any point to send me an email, as several folks have done already this morning. And Carol, I see your question there. Yes, the slide deck will be shared. So having said all of that, I think it's time to get things underway. And Bruno, I'll get you to move the slide forward and invite Linda and Teresa to begin their presentation.
Thanks so much for getting us started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Ford de Cunha, and I am the OPC lead for this project. I'm speaking to you today from the Durham region, which forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation. It's on these ancestral and treaty lands that I work, learn, and live.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Powley, and I am the CPCO lead for this project. I am speaking to you today from Toronto region, situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. It is on these ancestral lands that I work, learn, and live.
Thank you, Teresa. I'd also like to thank the content contributors for this webinar, all of whom were writers for the revised language curriculum. So appreciation is extended to Lark Barker, who is a special education teacher, Tara Kumab, who is a primary teacher, and Stacey Rickman, who is a speech and language pathologist. This webinar will provide you with information regarding some of the key changes in the curriculum, with a focus on the topics listed on this slide. In addition, we will share culturally responsive leadership practices for your consideration as you reflect on how you will lead the implementation of the new curriculum at your school. Please feel free to share your questions as mentioned in the chat box, and we will try our best to respond to all questions at the end of this webinar. Today is the first in a series of 3 webinars, each of which will focus on unpacking key changes and content additions to the new curriculum, emphasizing inquiry-focused leadership approaches and actions to guide school leaders. The webinars will highlight strategies to build collective efficacy through collaborative and inquiry-focused leadership approaches. Today, we will be talking about the new leadership document. The content of this document will complement our conversations today, and more information will be added to this document as each webinar is presented. The podcast series features Usha James from the Critical Thinking Consortium, and it is specific to the development of leadership skills within a reflective and iterative framework. We invite you to listen to episode 1 of the podcast, which has already been released. More information can be found on our association websites. Principal's potential for positive impacts on literacy outcomes is well documented in the research and referenced here in this link to the International Literacy Association document, Principals as Literacy Leaders. Within this webinar, all references to principals includes both principals and vice principals. As school leaders, we support student achievement in literacy through the actions we take that support a school culture focused on higher literacy achievement for all students. We help teachers to focus on effective literacy practices and support teachers, parents, and communities in increasing the amount of time dedicated to literacy. We guide and approve the purchases of resources and engage in professional learning alongside educators. And most importantly, we take leadership in establishing and monitoring school learning plans. This project is intended to support your leadership and emphasizes an inquiry approach. The suggested overarching inquiry question is focused on leading the implementation of the language curriculum and is open-ended so that you can personalize and adapt the questions to better serve the needs of your school community. An inquiry approach is much more than simply asking a question. It is a comprehensive approach that understands that really deep and transformative learning that will stick is not going to happen unless educators have both an opportunity to practice and the conditions for professional learning that engage them in thinking critically about their practice. So a critical inquiry approach to professional learning validates that it takes time and space and some structure to help educators engage in meaningful inquiry. Identifying and understanding barriers to learning are key in inquiry approaches and culturally responsive and relevant leadership. As leaders, you are undoubtedly aware that the Ontario Human Rights Commission Right to Read report, which is linked here for you, and the way in which it has informed the revised curriculum. It will be important for you to continue to build staff understanding of the OHRC Right to Read report, which highlights the personal and societal consequences of reading difficulties in Ontario schools. The report notes that students with word reading difficulties, dyslexia, and other disabilities, students from lower income backgrounds, racialized students, and Indigenous students are all much more likely to fall behind their peers when it comes to early reading. This is what makes learning to read a human right. The Right to Read report makes valuable recommendations for how literacy practices and school conditions must evolve to improve outcomes for underserved students, while highlighting that literacy is a social responsibility and a social justice issue that requires both an updated curriculum and financial resources. As you are aware, the curriculum was released online in June of this year. In addition to the curriculum document, the ministry website also includes helpful resources as listed on the slide. So our work today and in the upcoming webinars will focus on the document, which is pictured here, the key changes document. And then a link is provided for that document as well.
The key changes chart begins with the curriculum introduction. There is merit in exploring this section of the curriculum with staff as it highlights important principles. There is a clear message that all students can be successful literacy learners, and there is a focus on our shared responsibility to maintain a culture of high expectations in our classrooms and schools. The reference to foundational skills, including oral language learning, is important to highlight. The introduction also affirms the importance of developing literacy programs that remove barriers to learning and provide students with access to high-quality learning opportunities, promote joy and curiosity, and empower student agency. The curriculum introduction provides key information, and it will be important to take time to explore this section with staff. Within this introduction, you will find a strong emphasis on the approaches shared on the slide, all of which place students at the center of planning and goal setting. Successful implementation of each of these approaches requires that educators have an understanding of scientific research related to language and literacy acquisition, know the complex identities of their students, and hold the belief that all students are capable and competent learners. In the slides that follow, we will delve into each of these instructional approaches, sharing updates and suggestions to support your leadership decisions and planning. Universal design for learning and differentiated instruction are familiar to you, and as school leaders, you are aware that they can be used in combination to help teachers respond effectively to the strengths and needs of all students. A good beginning is to ensure that educators are able to distinguish between these two approaches. While the UDL framework provides educators with broad principles for planning language instruction and learning experiences for a diverse group of students, differentiated instruction allows them to address specific skills and learning needs. It involves leveraging student strengths and using responsive and varied approaches, such as differentiated content, process, product, and environment, to teach specific content skills and address specific learning needs. The curriculum has a section specific to UDL and DI, both found under program considerations. You may also find the Learning for All document helpful to revisit, and the link and QR code are provided on this slide. The graphic shared on this slide is in fact taken from Learning for All and will help educators to understand the principles of both UDL and DI. The emphasis on universal design for learning is a notable new addition to the 2023 language curriculum. UDL, when implemented with efficacy, is one of the key contributors to ensuring equitable learning outcomes for all students. The goal of UDL is to design programs and environments that provide all students with equitable access to the language curriculum, ensuring that any barriers to learning are identified and removed. Tasks which foster collaboration, are meaningful and relevant, offer choice, and graduated levels of challenge are reflective of UDL. As part of your focus on UDL, you may want to revisit the importance of accessible, inclusive tasks that have varied entry points for all learners. This would include equitable access to learning tools and technology. This slide includes a few examples for you to share with staff. The emphasis on differentiated instruction is also a notable new addition to the 2023 language curriculum. DI, when implemented with efficacy, is another key contributor to ensuring equitable learning opportunities and outcomes for all students. Examples are shown on the slide, as is the graphic from Learning for All. It will be beneficial for educators to understand that DI is student-centered and involves a strategic blend of whole class, small group, and individual learning opportunities to suit students' differing strengths, interests, and levels of readiness to learn. Both DI and UDL are based on effective assessment practices and require educators to know each learner's strengths, interests, and needs. Since the 2006 language curriculum, educators have learned a great deal about the importance of culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. The new revised language curriculum clearly and strongly affirms its importance, as outlined on this slide. Effective, culturally responsive, and relevant pedagogy includes instruction that offers students choice, encourages a sense of agency in learning, and further motivates and engages students in language and literacy learning and in the development of self-efficacy. Instruction must be meaningful and relevant to students' lived experiences. In language in particular, consideration must also be given to the cultural and social impact of texts and topics selected. This will continue to be important as you make decisions about resources and texts as a school community. There is an imperative of cultural awareness and competency in leadership decision-making around instructional guidance and practice as related to CRRP, and would inform our own professional learning and development as school leaders. You will also notice that the first few bullets on this slide provide an opportunity to link to the work of building collective efficacy as we lead to establish a culture of high expectations and rich, high-quality instruction and tasks for all students. We have provided a link to the ministry site for considerations for program planning, human rights, equity, and inclusive education. This site includes a video along with additional content. Unfortunately, the video currently does not have volume, and we have written to the ministry about this, but we've decided to include the link as we hope that that will be rectified and would provide valuable information for you and your staff. This slide, taken from the Right to Read Inquiry and Report, details the tiered approach to literacy instruction. Although the tiered approach is not new, it is now firmly in place in the language curriculum and will inform school and board plans, that respond to the Right to Read report. Because of its significance in the language curriculum, we have included some detailed notes for this slide specific to the tiered approach to literacy instruction. The language curriculum states that the tiered approach to literacy instruction is a proactive, preventative model designed to provide timely support for all students in order to prevent literacy difficulties from developing. The slide summarizes the principles of a tiered approach to literacy instruction. Across all tiers, you will notice a focus on systematic, evidence-based instruction, responsive, targeted instruction, guided by assessment of student learning. You will notice that the intensity of instruction increases as we move up the tiers, and in all 3 tiers, whole group, small group, and individualized instruction is addressed.
Thanks, Teresa. So effective Tier 1 instruction, that's for all students in the regular classroom, using UDL and DI, is designed to support all students to minimize the number of students requiring Tier 3 support. Tier 2 is an addition to Tier 1 and is based on assessment data. Teachers provide more intensive instruction and interventions in the classroom for small groups, usually 3 to 5 students, and/or for individual students. Tier 3 is an addition to Tier 1 instruction and again is based on assessment data. Teachers provide intensive support and intervention for very small groups that can be about 2 to 3 students and/or individual students who are experiencing difficulties regardless of whether they have an individual education plan or an identified special education need. Precise and personalized assessment and instruction are often planned with the support of other educators, including a special education teacher. Tier 3 provides high intensity, data-driven, evidence-based instruction using validated, supplemental instruction and interventions delivered by a trained reading specialist or other specially trained educator or professional or a special education teacher. As school leaders, you will want to highlight the following from the language curriculum. The implementation of tiered approach to language and literacy instruction is the responsibility of all classroom teachers, as well as other educators. In the classroom, students' progress is frequently monitored, and early and ongoing assessment data is used to identify skill gaps and determine the appropriate level of intensity of instruction. So when you review the goals, the vision and goals section of the curriculum, you will notice some significant shifts from the previous curriculum. It is important to understand that these shifts, particularly the focus on systematic and explicit instruction for foundational skills strands, are informed by proven research. Systematic instruction refers to concepts and materials that are taught through a carefully planned scope and sequence, while explicit instruction refers to teaching that is clear, direct, and purposeful. There is a clear focus on programming, which is relevant and responsive to the unique strengths and experiences of students. Also, the emphasis on digital media literacy is now embedded throughout the curriculum and is no longer a separate strand, as was the case in the 2006 curriculum. So it will be important for educators to understand that by embedding these media literacy skills throughout the curriculum, it does not diminish the importance, but rather amplify the competency. The same holds true for oral language, no longer a separate strand, but proven by research to be critical to literacy learning. So we're now going to turn our attention to changes to the curriculum strand, which represents some of the most significant shifts in the new curriculum. Each strand has overall expectations, which will inform the evaluation of student learning. Strand A is an overarching strand and is intended to be integrated into all other language strands and across curricular subjects. Strand B is central to all literacy learning, and instruction should reflect the integration of Strand B into strands C and D. The diagram on the slide shows the integrated relationships across strands, which is a key consideration for educators as they plan for and assess student literacy learning. When comparing the 2006 curriculum to the new 2023, the most significant shifts and changes are found in strands A and B. So as leaders, you will want to pay close attention to this newer content and engage staff in professional learning opportunities. Special consideration will be needed to select assessment tools and strategies, which will allow educators to monitor learning within this newer content. As leaders, you will find it helpful to refer to the Ministry of Education Key Changes chart that has a detailed section on each strand, noting new strand additions and changes. The QR code on the screen will take you there. So this strand has 3 overall expectations as noted on the slide. To support co-planning and professional learning across grades, divisions, and subject-specific programs, it is helpful to note that the 7 transferable skills apply to all curriculum documents from grades 1 to 12. Developing transferable skills essentially means learning for transfer. In other words, students take what is learned in one situation and apply it to other new situations. Students' understanding of online rights and responsibilities, along with how to navigate online environments safely while managing privacy and personal data in a way that supports their well-being, is found within digital media literacy. Students develop their digital identity and learn how to interact and contribute to an empathetic, respectful, and inclusive online community. Under applications, connections, and contributions, students explore concepts of identity, self, and a sense of belonging through their own lived experiences and those of others, including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. When we look at the new additions and changes to the curriculum, Strand B really stands out. So some of the most significant content shifts from 2006 to 2023 are found in this strand. As well, the Ministry of Education's response, the read inquiry, and report is strongly evident in this strand. While the 2006 curriculum referenced some of these foundational skills, the new curriculum has shifted to provide very concise and detailed skills and knowledge by grade and division. You will see these notable shifts in the 2 continua, which map out foundational skills and knowledge across grades and divisions, including references to kindergarten and grade 9. The release of the 1 to 8 curriculum has come alongside the release of the new de-streamed grade 9 English course. There is much continuity in program strands and expectations from grade 8 to grade 9. Understanding how the curriculum extends into grade 9 will help educators to support students' transition from elementary to secondary. So this strand provides an instructional reading hierarchy, which begins with the phonological awareness, which is the hearing and manipulating of sounds, and phonics skills as part of a central focus on supporting students in building word reading skills. The 2023 focus on developing fluency in word reading skills is a key change from the 2006 curriculum. This shift is significant and will impact educators' selection of instructional and assessment materials and resources. So for example, decodable texts are necessary to support early word reading skill development, and they may not have been included in past classroom and school resource selection and use. It is important that the decodable texts align with the curriculum-informed scope and sequence of skills. You will wish to consult with Central Board leads for more information on potential board recommended resources. Leaders will find the glossary helpful, as there are quite a number of new terms embedded in Strand B specific to these foundational skills. There will be changes in classrooms to reflect Strand B and foundational skills. These photos are actually taken from Tara's classroom. I introduced her as a content expert and contributor to our webinar. You can see that Tara is working on using Elkanon boxes and to help students blend and segment as they learn to apply their phonics skills. She's also using magnetic letters, letter cards, and tiles, as well as phoneme cards. You might see educators beginning to use sound walls instead of word walls as well. While there has been a pause on screening requirements within PPM 168, there remains a requirement for protected time on the foundations of learning instruction found in Strand B, specifically for grades 1 to 3. School leaders will want to work with grade 1 to 3 educators to ensure that timetables align with the PPM requirements. A helpful note, both the PPM and this guide provides suggestions for timetabling specific to grades 1 to 3.
This slide captures the overall expectations for strand C and D. In reading through these strands, it's clear that the revised curriculum is not a full pendulum swing, but rather a strengthening and enriching of the curriculum with the inclusion of evidence-based strategies. You will note in strand C, the students are still reading for meaning. They will read a variety of diverse texts and demonstrate critical thinking and literacy. In strand D, there is still an emphasis on the writing process, creating texts and writing forms and genres. Both strands are rich in opportunities to develop oral language, reflecting that it is the foundation of all literacy learning. What has changed in these two familiar strands is a clear connection to strand B, the foundational skills. The first overall expectation in strand C, knowledge about text, includes opportunities for students to apply foundational skills and draw on background knowledge and experience and their vocabulary to help them comprehend text. The second overall expectations addresses the comprehension strategies listed on the slide. The language for these familiar comprehension strategies is somewhat different from the 2006 curriculum, and you may want to explore these differences with staff. For example, the comprehension strategies are now organized according to before reading, during reading, and after reading, with a greater focus on monitoring comprehension while reading and summarizing after reading. It's also important to note the addition of critical thinking in literacy as a distinct overall expectation. This includes making inferences and analyzing perspectives, which were in the previous 2006 curriculum under overall expectation, reading for meaning. Within strand D, there are 3 overall expectations as noted on the slide. Developing ideas and organizing content ensures that students will develop ideas on a variety of topics, including their own lived experiences. They will have opportunities to engage in research, including gathering information and verifying the reliability of sources. Under creating texts, there are strong connections to foundational learning in strand B. Students draw on their knowledge of language conventions, such as sentence structure, along with oral language skill, to create texts in various media forms and genres, including digital tools. An interesting addition to this overall expectation, publishing, presenting, and reflecting, is the inclusion of printing, cursive writing, and word processing. Some specific expectations are listed on the side as examples. Printing is an example of how students can further develop foundational skills from strand B within other strand expectations. As students learn and practice printing, they further develop orthographic mapping skills. Within orthographic mapping, the child links the phoneme sequence in a known spoken word with the sequence of letters in the corresponding written word. Let's move on to the key changes in the instructional approaches. The Wordle on one side of the slide captures some of the principles addressed in the instructional approaches section of the language curriculum. You will note phrases like safe and inclusive classrooms that promote joy, engagement, and motivation. Student-centered and asset-based are also highlighted. The other side of the slide lists the newly added instructional practices. The first 4 have already been discussed, but I would like to address the final 2. Oral communication instructional practices are highlighted to demonstrate that although oral communication is no longer a distinct strand in the curriculum, its importance is actually heightened, informed by research and woven throughout the document. The language program provides rich opportunities for students to engage in both listening and speaking, and to interact with others through conversation, discussion, teamwork, and oral presentation. Oral communication instruction should focus on the identification and development of the skills and strategies students use to understand and interact effectively with others. There's also an emphasis on higher order thinking to stimulate students' interest and engage them in their own learning. As principals, you will also want to discuss the differences in the norms and conventions associated with oral communication in different social and cultural contexts with staff, and dedicate some professional learning to this if needed.
And Teresa, I'm just going to jump in here. We've had a question with respect to any recommended researched approach for teaching cursive writing. Might you have any suggestions or arrows to point folks in directions that would be fruitful?
Luciana, I believe that we do have some resources, including in the shared folder that the committee working on this series has developed, and perhaps that's something we could look into and send out to participants.
Great. So just to repeat, you'll be getting the PowerPoint, the recording, all of the resources in an email coming to you in a couple of days to all of our participants.
Thank you, Luciana. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about multimodal literacy instruction. The instructional approaches section of the curriculum, you will see the addition of multimodal literacy instruction. Recognizing that today's students engage with texts in multiple modes, including written, oral, visual, and audio texts, as well as text forms and genres from various cultures and in print and digital environments, multimodal instruction draws on a variety of teaching methods. These methods help students develop their ability to make meaning of the text they encounter and create text to communicate meaning, using various modes, media, forms, and technology. Multimodal literacy instruction also facilitates translanguaging, the use of different languages together, so that students who communicate in more than one language can naturally and fluidly use their multiple linguistic, literacy, and cultural resources to develop knowledge and skills in the instructional language. As you are considering the implementation of the curriculum, this final point serves as a good reminder about the importance of including ESL educators in planning.
And Teresa, we did have someone ask exactly about this. So very much it's at the root of the Right to Read report, and that notion of how is it that we're meeting the needs of our kids who speak multiple languages? How do we use that as an asset? Thank you.
So thank you, Teresa. So we know that the new curriculum has introduced some significant changes and revisions, some of which we've discussed today. However, or wherever you begin your school's collaborative inquiry journey, you will want to consider how to lead your team in co-constructing initial school learning plans and goals, which are paced and scaffolded to ensure mastery experiences for educators and their students. By paying attention to these considerations, you will be on the path to building collective efficacy. According to John Hattie, collective efficacy is the collective belief of teachers in their ability to positively affect students. His research indicates that collective efficacy is strongly correlated with student achievement. Let's take a moment to listen to Jenny Donahue, who is from Ontario, as she describes collective efficacy and its positive impact on school.
Collective teacher efficacy refers to a group of teachers' beliefs. It could be a team of teachers on staff at a school or an entire staff, but it refers to a belief in their ability to influence student outcomes, including those who are unmotivated, disengaged, or disadvantaged. So teachers' beliefs are very powerful because they guide our actions, they guide our behavior, the effort that we put forth, how much we persist, especially when faced with difficult challenges. So it's really important to openly share, discuss, and collectively develop beliefs about our ability to impact student outcomes. If educators' realities are filtered through the belief that there's very little they can do to influence student outcomes, then those beliefs will be manifested in their practice. But I think one of the most important aspects of our beliefs is the idea that we hold expectations for students. And what we find in the research is when teachers hold high expectations, they have a greater sense of collective teacher efficacy. And so the relationship between those two ideas is really important. But most importantly, when teachers hold high expectations, they also help students to believe that they can do well. And so they raise students' expectations of themselves. So where collective efficacy is present, staffs are more likely to put forth greater effort and persistence. They're more likely to attend to students who are struggling and need extra support. They're more likely also to increase time on task and encourage parental involvement because they have the belief that they're able to achieve the outcomes they want, so they welcome parents into the school environment. In addition, when collective efficacy is present, staffs are more likely to foster learner autonomy. They're more likely to believe that they can decrease disruptive behavior, and therefore they do so. They have higher expectations of students.
So with the key ideas from the video in mind, let's look at approaches that will support leaders to build and enhance collective efficacy with staff while leading the implementation of the language curriculum. So we will be providing a selection of potential leadership moves, inquiry-focused questions, and evidence of impact indicators to help you engage in this work. Recognizing that schools and school districts have unique and diverse strengths and needs, leaders will want to reflect on which of these examples could best support their school planning and school team. The suggestions that we'll provide on the document that's forthcoming align with the Ministry of Education's key changes chart. This version aligns the first version aligns with the key changes that we've discussed in our webinar today. And in our upcoming webinars, further leadership suggestions for the other key changes will be added. These suggestions are not intended to reflect an exhaustive list, and there will be other ideas you will want to incorporate into your planning based on your previous leadership experiences. So the graphic included throughout our presentation is intended to convey the iterative and cyclical nature of critical inquiry approach. It is also a reminder that all of the elements in our chart, the leadership moves, inquiry questions, and evidence of impact indicators, are in service of the development of collective efficacy. The graphic highlights the multiple entry points for this work, and we have intentionally designed it to help communicate that there is no one set, predetermined, or defined entry point. School leaders will find multiple entry points into this work and will work through the process in a way that meets the needs of their school communities and aligns with their leadership approach and leadership values. Let's take a look at some examples of how leaders may wish to engage in this work with staff.
So Linda, you've given some thought about how you might support staff with the curriculum introduction. Could you share your thoughts about these initial leadership moves, please?
Thanks, Teresa. So I selected these initial moves because I want to emphasize the importance of leveraging existing and new structures to engage staff from the beginning in co-constructing learning goals and school planning. By co-constructing professional learning content and plans alongside educators, school leaders are modeling a culturally responsive leadership style, which mirrors the practices educators are expected to use with students. I also wanted to highlight the importance of engaging a range of staff with diverse perspectives, knowledge, and experiences to leverage staff expertise and ensure a responsive leadership approach. So to support these leadership moves, I would start with these inquiry questions. I want to ensure that the co-constructed goals and school plans are focused and doable and are supported through varied, responsive, and collaborative learning opportunities. Also, I would want to lead discussions regarding how we might differentiate learning for educators, perhaps by division, given the shifting nature of the curriculum content across strands, or in a manner which would provide multiple entry points in response to the varying knowledge and experience of educators. Seeking voice and offering choice builds engagement and is effective for both educated professional learning and student learning in the classroom.
Thank you, Linda. Those are such important consideration. And by engaging staff in these discussions, you'll be supporting a culture of collaboration and building collective efficacy. As understanding of the new curriculum increases for staff, you'll want to keep revisiting questions such as these to ensure that planning remains relevant. Could you comment on how you selected some indicators as evidence of impact?
Yes, thank you. So these initial indicators are important as they reflect opportunities for educators to have a voice and agency in school planning. I would definitely pay attention to co-constructing success criteria with staff, specific to areas of programming, assessment, and focus. So it's important to have a shared understanding of what success looks like and sounds like, both from the perspective of educator practice and through student learning outcomes and experiences. When considering options for collaborative learning structures, I would also reach out to my colleagues to seek feedback on ideas on how to creatively organize time and space to support staff. So the vision and goals section of the curriculum will require some attention. To support educators in understanding the why behind the curriculum revisions and changes, it would be helpful to draw connections to the Right to Read report recommendations. Alongside this comparison, it would be beneficial for staff to draw connections to related board policies and procedures. Identifying and removing barriers to student learning includes a focus on ensuring a culturally relevant and responsive approach to resource selection. And this could be a good starting place for school planning.
Thank you, Linda. Selecting culturally relevant and responsive resources will be an ongoing process, revisited often as educators continue to learn about and build relationship with students. I found the curriculum section specific to text and resources selection particularly helpful.
I agree, Teresa. These questions are taken directly from the program considerations section. So by starting with the questions such as these examples, school teams will be prompted to consider what student information and data is available, which can guide resource and text selection. As we've discussed before, it is important for school teams to challenge their perceptions of what they know about their students. So rather than asking, what do we know about our students, leaders may wish to ask, what do we think we know about our students? Either way, resource and text selection discussions should be ongoing throughout the year as educators continue to deepen their relationships with students and learn more about their interests, strengths, and lived experiences.
Linda, when I look at the indicators or the evidence of impact that you've selected, I notice a student-centered focus, in particular, the emphasis on ensuring that students have ongoing opportunities for self-selecting topics and materials really stands out to me.
Yes, thanks, Teresa. I selected that indicator as it reminded me of the importance of having students make meaningful connections to the classroom resources while also connecting oral, reading, and writing experiences. All of these approaches will enhance student engagement and agency. So, Teresa, when you think about the program and language in the revised curriculum, what are some leadership moves that you would consider?
I think it would be important to think about leveraging staff strengths. I would want to consider how I might engage teacher leaders who I know have both knowledge and experience with evidence-based practices and literacy. I would want to include them in supporting our collective planning and think about how I might engage them in helping the entire community and supporting the implementation of the new language curriculum. I would also need to be intentional in creating conditions that allow for authentic and genuine conversations so that staff can surface their questions and their concerns. And to support the moves I've discussed, I would think about two inquiry questions to guide that work. The first question affirms our current knowledge and practices while challenging us to collectively consider ways to refine, adjust, adapt, or extend our practices.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, Teresa. And I think that provides an opportunity to engage staff while providing an entry point into what could be challenging discussions about new instructional practices that will need to be adopted or previously used approaches that will need to be abandoned. This question also provides an opportunity to go deeper by naming and speaking to pervasive practices that have jeopardized or limited learning for specific student communities. I think the evidence of impact indicators selected here addresses the need to really zone in on strand B. That's what's, as it reflects the significant changes in the curriculum. There's a specific attention to continua in strand B and to PPM 168 and the timetabling expectations as outlined in the memorandum.
Yes, and when I look at some of the suggested examples on this slide, I like that there is affirmation of the value of co-planning and co-teaching, as well as the integration of language across the curriculum, the intentional use of rich tests to support reading for meaning. Moving on to the instructional approaches highlighted in the key changes chart for the revised curriculum, I see that these suggested leadership moves support collaborative cultures and alignment. What do you think, Linda?
I agree. And it's important to point out that by engaging in this discussion, leaders can ensure that any misinterpretations related to explicit and systematic instruction or multimodal literacy can be addressed. So any discussion about instructional approaches provides an opportunity to build collective reflection and action. So inquiry questions focused on what we are already doing as a community in literacy are important, as are questions that help us think about what we need to refine, adapt, or change.
Yes, and the second example related to multimodal approaches really resonates with me. Principals might use this question to ensure there isn't a shift to an over-reliance on worksheets or drills or a one-size-fits-all approach. This example also provides an opportunity to focus on multimodal learning within a student-centered, asset-based approach to learning.
So Teresa, I noticed in this example of evidence of impact, there is another opportunity to ensure that instructional approaches in the curriculum are fully understood.
Yes, and I think the second and third examples on this slide reinforce the emphasis on collaborative cultures, including a focus on co-planning and co-teaching. These are powerful job-embedded approaches to professional learning that can continue to serve us in leading the implementation of the curriculum while building collective efficacy.
Yes, and to reiterate, these are offered as examples, with more possibilities are coming with the PDF document that was mentioned earlier in the webinar. A reminder that this document will be extended to include remaining parts of the key changes chart for webinar 2 and 3. So this brings us to the end of today's webinar, and we would like to take a moment to address any questions that you may have in the chat. And as we are addressing questions, we'd like to draw your attention to the feedback survey for the webinar today. OPC and CPCO appreciate your feedback. The feedback will help inform our upcoming webinar sessions and asynchronous supports. Please take a minute to complete the short survey using the QR code on the slide. It will only take about 2 or 3 minutes to complete. And when completing the feedback form, please remember to click on the specific form for this webinar. And also, if you have had a chance to listen to the episode 1 of the podcast, we'd appreciate your feedback on that as well. And there's an opportunity in that form for you to click and give feedback.
And I'm just going to pop that link to the feedback survey into the chat as well to make it easier for folks. And I can't stress enough how useful and how amazing the podcast is, which you'll find on your association website. If you do a search that says something like leading the implementation of the revised language project, you will you'll land on that landing page, no doubt. We did have one question, my friends, around recommended texts for assessment. And I know PPM 168 had some direction, and then we had a little bit of redirection. Is there anything you'd like to add with respect to that?
Well, one thing I would say, Luciana, is that our third webinar is going to be focused on assessment, and hopefully we will have more to share at that particular point. And we will go back to Lark, Stacy, and Tara, our curriculum experts who are working in classrooms and a couple of different boards to inform some of the work that we'll do in that third webinar. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Linda?
Yes, thank you, Teresa. I would just add that it might be helpful to reach out to your central board staff. The ministry has communicated some information around options for assessment and instruction through a board project plan. And so they'll have some information, and just checking in with the board central leads in terms of decisions boards are making around selection and purchases potentially.
One of our participants mentioned that their board was in a bit of a holding pattern. And to be honest, that's not a surprise. The reality is that with the curriculum having been released when it was, all of us are in a bit of a critical inquiry through this work. And that's where leaning on each other across boards can actually make a difference in terms of surfacing strategies, approaches, resources that have best impact. So we really welcome your input to all of that as well. We do have a question around updated progress reports or report cards. Have we heard anything on that from the ministry?
Nothing yet, although we do know that it will be 1 mark for language.
Yes, and there's a change right there. So for sure, there's a shift there. We're getting lots of folks expressing their appreciation and how useful all of this time has been. We have a minute or so left today. I'm so happy that we're able to honor everyone's time and come in at that 11 o'clock hour. Teresa and Linda and Bruno, I want to thank each of you, as well as the other folks who had a direct hand in building the revised curriculum. Your expertise, your resources, your wonderful manner in bringing this forward in such an effective and efficient way is well appreciated. To all of our participants, we can't thank you enough for spending an hour with us. Please know that in 2 days, you will get a follow-up email with everything that you've seen today. Scanning that QR code for the participant survey helps us, because when we know better, we do better. I see that there's a question that's just popped up in the Q&A. Is there a way to share the podcast? Michelle, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Let me find out, and we'll see if we can make that as part of our communications. To everyone that's able to still stay online with us, again, thank you so much for making this part of your day, with it being Monday and everything else. We look forward to seeing you November 28th for our next webinar, and watch please for the next podcast, which will be released in the coming weeks as well. To my colleagues, Linda, Teresa, and Bruno, if you don't mind staying on the line and we can do a quick debrief. I think what I'll do now is stop the podcast. Oh, shoot, maybe I can't pause the record. We'll see what we can do on that one. Actually, I can. There we go. And